Shalom, shalom, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Pulse of Israel here in our eternal and ancestral homeland, the Judean hills of the land of Israel. Tonight, we're going to be speaking with Jeremy Saltan, a guest I enjoy talking to for his political insights, because he's right there in the thick of it. Political strategist, number 14 on Naftali Bennett's list, very close confidant and advisor to the Prime Minister. So let's bring on Jeremy Saltan. Shalom, shalom, Jeremy. How are you?
Shalom. It's great to see you, Avi. How are you doing? I'm doing pretty good. You know, kids are going to school tomorrow. It's a good thing.
Yeah, my kids started going to school yesterday. So yeah, summer's over, fall's upon us, the Chagim are upon us. And the Israeli government is in full swing. How are things going with this very interesting government we have and we're living with nowadays?
I think it's looking pretty good. We're going to have the Knesset voting in the first reading on the national state budget. You know, the thing that we just haven't been doing for a number of years here. Of course, it passed in the cabinet last month, and we're going to go ahead and make sure to pass in the first reading on Thursday, and then we're going to go ahead and deal with the Knesset committees. Obviously, there'll be a few tweaks here and there, and give the people what, you know, the basic elementary thing that they deserve is a government that actually prioritizes budgets and executes the policy that they were set out to go ahead and accomplish. And of course, like I said, you have the situation of us opening the school year September 1st on time. For me, I'm very happy about it. I know that a lot of parents that I'm talking to are as well. And of course, the fact that in terms of the numbers with Corona, we were able to go through this current wave without a lockdown. And that is, of course, what I think is also a very, very good thing for many businesses across the country, that after, you know, a situation of 3 national lockdowns, were quite afraid of a 4th one in terms of their future. And of course, you know, last week we had the big Biden-Bennett meeting, right? The big trip to Washington. So really, it's been an eventful couple weeks. Very nice summer. For those who feel the Knesset doesn't work on recess, well, you know, the government has done quite a few things during this recess, indeed.
So let's start big picture, and then we'll drill down into the individual issues and events, some of which you actually spoke about, specifically the big President Biden, President Biden, Prime Minister Bennett meeting in the Oval Office in D.C. But let's take a step back, big picture. We're now a few weeks into this new government actually running. And again, for those who not so familiar, or those who are familiar, it's very much not an ideological government. It has the right-wing parties of Yamina and New Hope together with the far left, even anti-Israel parties of the Muslim Iran Party and very anti-Zionist Meretz labor and members. How overall is it going due to this hybrid situation of not being able to be a cohesive ideological government?
You know, for the most part, it works. It works well because the people come to work. You know, they come in the morning very happy to go ahead and take the things that divide the various, you know, members and parties of this coalition, put them to the side and work on, you know, the common denominator and consensus in terms of what we do feel we can accomplish. For sure, Corona, you know, COVID, the Delta variant is a very big thing that we know went ahead and affected everybody, regardless of political ideology, in terms of being able to deal with it. You know, that was something that everyone was able to get on board with when it came to passing a state budget, avoiding another, you know, 5th election. Just craziness. This was all stuff that we all agreed upon. And when it comes to the everyday things, we all understand that there is not a lot of movement to be made in terms of ideological gains, but there's plenty to do in terms of the everyday life of, you know, every citizen. It doesn't matter if you came from the US, the UK, Canada, you know, SA, wherever it might be, you know, from down under. You're used to a government that isn't always dealing with matters of life and death and ideology. You're used to a government that actually deals with the everyday matters that deal with the citizen. That's what we've been doing, and it's been working pretty well until now.
All right, so let's go into the details. We just had the trip, the meeting of President Biden and Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. Good meeting. I mean, the message that the Prime Minister's office put out is that all the goals were achieved. So please inform us. What were those goals, and why does the Prime Minister and his office believe that they've been achieved?
Well, not all of the goals were actually made public, but in terms of the ones that we did make public, for sure, stuff that doesn't, matter to me or you, Avi, but to the average Israeli, what they always care about is, the visa. How are they able to get into the United States to visit? That's always something that bothers them. The fact that you were able to have this area flagged, by the Prime Minister, raised with, the meeting with President Biden. This is something that previous prime ministers were reluctant to do, to take an issue that might seem trivial. But this is just, again, going back to things that everyday Israelis care about. They care about being able to get on a plane and go to the States and enjoy a nice vacation and come back without having to worry whether their visa is going to be accepted or not. Waiting in the long lines, of course, to be able to go ahead and get stuff approved by the embassy, which, thank God, is now in Jerusalem, of course, and then having to go ahead and go through the long lines, of course, in immigration and so forth within the various airports. So that was a very big thing in terms of regular Israelis. In terms of Iran, look, Bennett was very clear that he had a complete reassessment in terms of how to go ahead and tackle and resolve the Iranian issue. And he came together with a strategy and a plan that he went ahead and he presented to President Biden. If until the Bennett visit, what we've seen from Biden is only talking about the diplomatic option, we saw there President Biden sitting besides Prime Minister Bennett talking about the fact that there are other options on the table. And this is the first time that we're hearing the American administration actually saying that publicly and clearly. And this, of course, coming after Bennett giving his plans, presenting them to the president. This I think is a very, very, very big, important, policy, when, of course, you can't go into the details of that. But I think that you can understand from the fact that there is at least a change in the public rhetoric from the Americans that this is a positive maneuver in terms of what we were able to get out of this, situation. There were other things, of course, that we're able to go ahead and, check off the box. One of, the most important things there was to be able to go ahead and reset the relationship with the American administration. Whether you like it or you don't like it, we know that there was a lot of hostility between the Biden administration and, of course, Netanyahu and the Likud party. Coming in, Bennett was able to, as a new person, even though having very similar ideas when it comes to Iran and a majority of the national security issues on the agenda, be able to go ahead and make sure that we go back to that special relationship in which the Americans take the Israeli position into account and go ahead and have that more feeling of bipartisanship that, again, whether you agree with it or not, the stuff that we heard coming from voices in the Democrat Party is that was something that was no longer the case. And of course, if we're looking at this visit where you have Bennett with many public positions, even to the right of Netanyahu, being accepted, going into the Oval Office, into his various meetings that he had, of course, in the days before, and really seeing an acceptance from really the entire spectrum of the American establishment from both parties. And this is a very, very good thing for us, being able to go ahead and move forward. Of course, other issues that the Prime Minister mentioned within the public section, talking about, the various challenges we have on our borders, the other issues of being able to go ahead and make really progress in terms of going forward from, the Abraham Accords of what was been able to been accomplished, during the Trump administration with the first four countries, and be able to take that normalization process and expand it and bring it over to more countries. So, that's just, a few things. There were a lot of other issues that were brought up there. But when you're able to go ahead and really come with a long list of things that you want to get accomplished, I would say it comes down to one main thing. Politics is about people. It's about the relationships. Biden and Bennett had never met each other in their lives. This was an opportunity for them to go ahead and build that relationship. The first part of the meeting, of course, was only the two of them one-on-one. It was scheduled to only go about 20, 25 minutes. That ended up going way over the amount of time that was supposed to, more than double the amount of time. And then, of course, the time with both teams ended up, of course, being as well a very, very long and thorough meeting. Now we have a situation where the prime minister can go ahead and pick up the phone and be able to pick up on wherever, things were left on a wide variety of issues that were raised within the Oval Office. So, from this perspective, this is the beginning of a very, very important relationship. And of course, we'll see how a lot of these things play out in the weeks and the months, and I would say, over the next 2 years, of course, ahead. But I think that the main takeaway here is that you see two figures who are able to sit down, have a good conversation, have the beginning of a good relationship, and be able to have a situation where here we are a number of days after the meeting where neither side is leaking, nasty things. You just have a situation where you had a positive experience on both ends. And that is a very welcome thing, especially considering the national security, challenges we're dealing with and the need to be able to, of course, bring resolution to a lot of those issues.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned the leaking issue because I want to follow up on each one of those issues independently, more of a deep dive, and specifically regarding Iran. I know there were a number of concerns coming out of the meeting. 2 points that came out is the timing. The timing right now, with the absolute fiasco of the Afghanistan evacuation, pullout, leaving Americans even stranded behind there, not even being saved by America. The Biden administration right now is looking not only just very weak on the world stage, but not reliable. Because not only Afghanis who are trusting America to look out for them and protect them from the Taliban, if they're now getting killed, but potentially Americans could be killed by the Taliban who are stranded there. So they're not looking so reliable as an administration. That's one. And the other point is, in terms of the leaks, one thing that former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned about was when Foreign Minister Yair Lapid said, okay, there are going to be no surprises with the U.S. administration. And Netanyahu said that's a horrendous policy. We can't, any time we actually we tell them what we want to do, well, they put pressure for us to stop. Sometimes they actually leaked it to the Iranians. That Netanyahu said himself. Again, I don't have the details upon that, but definitely in terms of John Kerry and potentially the Biden administration. So there was this critique of why Prime Minister Bennett is allowing for this policy of no surprises, just basically taking away the ability of Israel to do everything that it believes is necessary to protect its interests without too much of the influence and potential leaks from the Biden administration, which in the past hampered our efforts. So,
yeah, I'm happy to go ahead and touch on those things. First of all, in terms of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan, that's something where I think, again, the facts speak for themselves. I don't think there's any real reason for me to go ahead and go into that because the Israeli perspective, of course, is irrelevant when it comes to what happened there. We were not a party to the Afghanistan, coalition that was built by George W. Bush, nor did we send any coalition forces during the entire mission. And, Netanyahu himself, of course, mentioned that he rejected an offer in terms of being able to go ahead and visit and see what was happening in terms of Afghanistan on the ground. I would say I think Israel did, a very smart move throughout the various, 20 years. It doesn't matter who it was in office, if it was Barack or Sharon or Netanyahu, to really stay away from the Afghanistan issue.
Just to clarify what you're saying, you're referring to the fact that the U.S. administration years ago offered Israel to do an Afghanistan type solution where America or international forces would protect Israel in the Jordan Valley, etc. And basically Netanyahu said, not interested. We don't want that type of solution. So because we can't.
They offered for Netanyahu to go ahead and see, things for himself on the ground. Look, but before America entered in Afghanistan in 2001, the Taliban was in control over 90% of the territory, with the Northern Alliance, obviously, in a few places up north. And if we fast forward 20 years after America's left Afghanistan, we're right back in the same, position. There is no vacuum in politics. There's no vacuum in security issues. And again, it's not been, and I don't think it's ever going to be, at least in my opinion, an issue for Israelis or an interest to go ahead and get involved in terms of what is happening there. And I would say, with that as the backdrop of what was going on, of course, with the terrorist attacks in Kabul during the ending days of the withdrawal of America from Afghanistan, having that picture of from the perspective of the bad guys in the Middle East, whether you're looking at ISIS or Iran or whoever it is, of having, the leader of the big Satan and the leader of the, little Satan sitting together and talking about how to resolve the issues of the Middle East. I think from that perspective, if you are looking for some sort of connection, that was something that definitely bothered, the bad guys from whatever side they might be in whatever country they might be in terms of the Middle East. Going over to the issue of no surprises, I really, I've had a very big issue with Netanyahu going ahead and making a big issue of this. It was Netanyahu himself who said that he was upset about the surprises that he got from the Obama administration. Michael Oren, who was, of course, the ambassador during his time period. This was before Kerry, of course, during, Hillary Clinton, during the first Obama term, talking about how there could be no daylight. And then, of course, the situation of, from his perspective, the Obama administration putting daylight. Now, we can go into, the relationships there, and we can go into the situation of who might be right or who might be wrong and who leaked first and, all of the different things there. But I think we can all understand that that was a very dysfunctional relationship in terms of everything from the government that we saw then. And when I'm saying the government, I'm talking about both the American and Israeli government, where you had a situation where they were not on the same page in terms of, forget about policy, but how to be able to actually handle things. You had each side trying to undercut each other. You would have, of course, Obama decided to negotiate without giving Israel a heads up that they were negotiating with Iran. You had, of course, Netanyahu deciding that he's going to Congress without letting Obama know that he was going and that he was going to be speaking. And those are just a few of the more high-profile things. If you want to go just to the everyday little nitty-gritty things in terms of the details, you just had a relationship which was not a normal functioning relationship, which is one that you would want to see again between what at least I believe, and I think a majority of people believe, is the most strategic and important relationship for the state of Israel. And that is, our special relationship with the United States of America. Look, you don't always agree on everything. You're going to have disagreements, but you need to be able to have mechanisms to be able to deal with those disagreements. And the idea of no surprises is that, to go ahead and, for instance, say, I understand what you're saying, Biden administration, that because this is an American citizen, you do not want us to demolish this person's house. However, we have an Israeli policy in place. We have an Israeli law. This is a terrorist. That's great that he's an American citizen, but he's not going to get special privilege, and we're going to go ahead and demolish his house. And, make sure that they know about it and they don't read about it in the press, right? That's an example of something, for instance, that happened earlier in the term. No surprises doesn't mean, oh, I'm not going to act, I'm not going to do anything. It's that you should not go ahead and surprise the other side and not let the other side know what it is that you're doing, and for them to go ahead and find out along with everyone else. Because again, if we're looking at, strategic partnerships, which of course are also built on trust and credibility and, of course, joint values and various aspects of the core. But you have a situation where if you do that to one side, they're going to do it to you on another side. And let's be honest, whatever Israel could do in terms of surprising America, there's an interest for Israel that America doesn't surprise Israel and go ahead and have a repeat of what we saw during the Netanyahu administration of a entire Iran plan going forward from the Americans without Israel having any clue in terms of what is going on there. Now, of course, when you have a disagreement and when you know what each other's positions are, you can still influence that. Now, influencing that doesn't always mean going ahead and going on TV and explaining about why the other person is wrong. You can go ahead and provide intelligence. Yes, for sure, there's always the risk of that intelligence, being mishandled or misused, or handing that over to another, party that you don't want to see that happening to. But let's be frank, that's been an issue that we've seen in all administrations from all parties. That isn't anything that's new. That's just one of the prices, of doing business, knowing that there's a potential risk and cost that you might need to go ahead and pay when it comes to that. But when it comes to the difference in the approach here between Netanyahu and Bennett, it's not, again, a difference in policy per se. I think the policy on Iran is very, very similar. You have a situation here of one person who says, I'm going to try to take my case to the people. And that's what Netanyahu tried to do time and time again, to go ahead and take the knowledge to the people. That's what you have to do. You have to go through the
American people you're referring to, for American
public. Yes, of course, to the American people, to be able to influence the American politicians. To do that, you have to leak things. To do that, you have to perhaps declassify certain things that perhaps should remain classified. There are various things you need to do when that's what your strategy is and that's what your approach is. Look, I'm looking after 12 years of Netanyahu. And again, he's done great things for the security of Israel, and no one doubts that. And anyone who does doubt that is someone who's just not connected to reality. But in terms of Iran is very close to the bomb, and it accelerated its process over the last 12 years when Netanyahu was prime minister. Yeah, there's a different approach, and that approach is to try to influence from within, to go ahead and again try to say, okay, you know what, you want to go ahead and do this. Let's talk about how you do this. And you know what? While we're talking about how you're doing it, we're gonna build a plan B. Can we agree in terms of plan A, either in terms of, there are various parameters. You can do parameters in terms of time, right? A time frame. You can do it in terms of certain benchmarks. Is Iran going to pass a certain thing? There are certain things that you can do in order to establish, to say, at what point do you realize, based on your own objectives, that plan A isn't working? And, we've been telling you about this plan B we've been working on. When can we go ahead and do plan B and have you also be a partner as helping us in terms of being able to execute, plan B?
I hear everything. I hear everything you're saying, and it all makes sense in a logical level. I think the major concern, and this is a concern that I have as well, is there not here a sense of naivete in terms of geopolitics, especially with the track record of, I'll just call it as it is, the Biden-Harris-Obama administration, because Obama is still behind the scenes there behind this administration, together with the fact that they just showed their cards to be a totally unreliable administration with how they just handled Afghanistan. So wait a second, with Iran, well, if we want to bomb something in Iran and we can't have surprises there, we know the American interest is to let Iran basically just go back to a very bad deal. Well, I guess are they going to be allowing to do what's necessary in Iran, or stopping us, or again behind the backs leaking to Iranians or Syrians, have them stop us from being able to do what we thought was necessary? Then is again all concern and plenty of stuff we're not going to know about, because all be
right, of course. And again, I'm saying, and I'll go back to this again. no surprises. What does Netanyahu say? No surprises mean. No surprises, according to Netanyahu, is Bennett says, "All right, we need to bomb Iran," and then we tell America, and then America says no, and then we don't bomb Iran. Right? That's his idea of no surprises. I'm telling you, that's not what no surprises means. So again, Netanyahu can say that's what it is. He can imply that's what it is, but that's not what it is. I have full confidence with the many years that I know the prime minister, that if he needs to do something, he's going to do something. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go ahead and tell your allies if something's going down, if they have, assets on the ground or whatever it is, to go ahead and clean up whatever they need to clean up ahead of time. Again, this idea of no surprises, you can go ahead and take that and turn it into whatever it is that you want to turn it into. But it's important to go ahead and look at who is the person saying it and what is it in terms of the way that they're defining it. And
no, I hear you.
Fine. That's fine politics-wise for Netanyahu
Right.
to try to reframe it and redefine it. But at no point has the prime minister ever said that he would wait for an American okay to go ahead and take whatever action he needs to take.
Let me just open it up for the audience to understand the even further complexity of what we're talking about. I don't remember the dates or the names, but there was a time when Netanyahu was prime minister and he wanted to bomb Iran. And together with the American administration, Israeli officials and Israel's defense establishment worked with the American administration to stop and not implement Netanyahu's plan. So that is, for Netanyahu, who everyone wants to think is one of the strongest prime ministers. So the question is, all right, so if the American administration were able to work with Israeli officials and Israel's defense establishment to stop Netanyahu, and that's when he was a strong man in Israeli politics and a strong Likud party, well, now the situation is much different. Again, Benny Gantz is defense minister. Don't know exactly where he holds on Iran, what he says, not necessarily what he believes, who knows. But no matter what Prime Minister Naftali Bennett wants to do, again, if he wants to bomb Iran like Netanyahu, well, we can have that similar situation. I'm not trying to say one is better than the other. I'm just putting the complex picture out there for people to understand. It very much is a complex situation.
No, for sure, it's a complex situation. Of course, the situation you're talking about, where I believe it was Mayor Dagan who decided not to, relay the order. I think, especially since there's awareness of something like that happening and that hitting the public, I think it would be very difficult to see a situation like that happening again. But what you're pointing out anyways deals with a separate issue, and that's not, the American side. Whether the Americans helped or not, that's a side issue. And that is Israeli security officials not following the order of the political leadership. Right. Now, because that's, the root of that issue. And I really think, especially, looking at Kochavi, looking at a lot of the other people that right now are at the head of the different security institutions, I really think that we're very far away from that. I think if we're looking at the top echelons, I think if we're looking at also the culture that has been really, at least from my impression, put down through the ranks, I don't see something like that happening again. In terms of this legitimacy thing, since you mentioned it, and I'm hearing this thing a lot, Trump was, of course, he lost the popular vote by several million to Hillary Clinton. That didn't stop him from being president. That didn't stop him from doing amazing things, for the state of Israel. And of course, that didn't stop him from having all of the authority of, and the full forces of being commander in chief as president of the United States of America. Naftali Bennett, whether people like it or not, is prime minister, and he's in full control of the government. And in terms of the legitimacy that he has, you can have people in the opposition who don't like the fact that, whoever gets 61 votes is able to go ahead and have a majority of the government. The same way that the Electoral College is something that bothered the Democrats when Trump
Jeremy, I
was.
wasn't referring to the legitimacy issue. I wasn't referring to the legitimacy issue. I was referring to the politic issue, meaning Netanyahu is a strong man with a strong, big Likud
You're
party.
making a contrast between
as opposed to not as a legitimacy. I'm talking about real politics, because a lot. I mean, I'll get into this. You know what? I'll just bring up the second issue, which just delves right into it, which is here at Bennett Land, and the headline news is that Benny Gantz has a meeting with Mahmoud Abbas. And the impression is that there was no coordination. There was no approval and talking with Naftali Bennett, and that he was surprised. Again, the official notice of the Prime Minister's office afterwards that no, it was approved by Prime Minister Bennett. Now, forgive me for not necessarily believing that. And I'm not expecting you to tell me anything else. You're going to tell me that, of course, there was a whatever. But as a citizen who has little understanding of Israeli politics and stuff, it doesn't look. It looks like he did a rogue policy of meeting Mahmoud Abbas.
Look, Benny Gantz, I'm happy to talk about him again on a political level. We're talking beforehand about the way that this government has worked. And it's worked really well, like I said, because you have people who are coming every day to work. The only person, really, in terms of the party leaders, that has been implying that he has other options is Benny Gantz. We know, of course, that Netanyahu has said publicly that he's leaving it as an open offer. Anytime Benny Gantz wants, they'll do a constructive no confidence motion, in which instead of Naftali Bennett, Benny Gantz will become prime minister in a very unusual 61 MK coalition, which would involve the Likud, UTJ, Shas, Smotrich. That 52 is pretty solid, but add on to that the 8 of blue and white, including MKs such as Alon Tal from the Environment Party, who's perhaps one of the most left-wing MKs in this current coalition, along with Shikli, who's, of course, an MK within Yamina. Having this weird constellation in order to get 61.
Another weird
constellation. The only way to do that is with Gantz, as prime minister. And each time he's been asked, in various TV interviews, so he's refusing to take that option off the table. I can't speak to whatever political motivation someone would have to allow something like that to maintain any oxygen within the current, political environment where, like I said, I really feel, and this includes my friends in blue and white, we're able to put all of our disagreements to the side to be able to go ahead and deal with issues. You had a situation where you had different people, they needed help in the exemption committee. And because of that, you need the health ministry, you need Nitzan Horowitz. And this is a Meretz guy who doesn't agree with me on a lot of things. We're able to go ahead and deal with all these special humanitarian cases and special, exemptions and whatever it is. You're able to go ahead and put politics aside to deal with real life issues. I would just say that on the political level, I think it's disappointing that he's the one exception within this government in which, as you said, people end up they draw their own conclusions. Again, I'm not going to say, I'm not going to speak to whether, one thing is more true or less true, but he's the one politician, and this is the truth, where people have, again, from the opposition leader Netanyahu, going over to, Gantz's own supporters and ours, as well as other parties across the spectrum, and a bunch of journalists. No one really knows what Benny Gantz, what he means when he says something. And a lot of the stuff has been puzzling because he's refusing to take the stuff off the table. I would call on him again in this juncture. I have in the past. I'll call on him again for the sake of just, having the normal government that he himself said was important to him, that he just take this off the table so that people no longer end up drawing their own conclusions every time he goes ahead and does something, every time he goes ahead and says something. Because I think as long as we're in this situation, we're going to have that shadow cast on every single thing that he does. And I'll just say, just as a political analyst, that's not something that's going to get him voters, and it's not something that I suppose is going to get him any points within his base.
correct me if I'm wrong, him having a meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, something that no Israeli government official has had any meeting since Obama was president and Netanyahu was forced to have a meeting. That's over 11 years ago. No Israeli government official has had a meeting. Even Naftali Bennett, not as prime minister, but before he was prime minister, he was very much supportive of sidelining Mahmoud Abbas because there's no one to talk to for any peace deals. And he said before his trip in a New York Times interview, there's not going to be any sovereignty, right? This isn't going to be an ideological government. We're not applying sovereignty, but there are also not going to be any peace talks, right? We're not going either right or left. And then all of a sudden, Benny Gantz has this meeting with Mahmoud Abbas, first Israeli government official. That doesn't help him to move over and potentially be a prime minister for a Likud right-wing government. That actually shoots himself in the foot if he wants to go in that direction. Am I not wrong in that assessment?
No, I mean, I tweeted out and people, jesting that. I was like, I'm guessing that means Gantz is taking this off the table. But if he's not, I'm sure that Netanyahu and Smotrich now will. But no, I talked to my friends in Likud and in Smotrich's party. They're like, again, we're happy to make him prime minister. I was like, how can you on one side blast him for sitting with Mahmoud Abbas and then on the other side say that you're willing to make him prime minister? There's just, again, if we go back to issues of trust and credibility, I think that most voters are as clever as you are, Avi, but unfortunately, they have yet to withdraw this offer from Benny Gantz. And Benny Gantz has, again, since he put this out, he's yet to say that because he met with Abu Mazen, he is now going ahead and declining officially for the first time the Netanyahu offer. So this just goes back to the situation of, how do you want to interpret that meeting? You can interpret it whichever way you want to interpret it. But that doesn't change the situation we were in before the meeting, because neither Gantz nor Netanyahu have changed their position when it comes to this offer. To explain to you how it is that there's a base of people where, despite this meeting, that they hate Bennett so much that they'd still be willing to go ahead and put their trust in Gantz as prime minister. I really don't know, but let's talk about the Palestinians. The Palestinians were discussed for I would say in terms of both quantity and quality. When you're looking at this visit, they were the lowest on the agenda that they've been since the beginning of the Oslo process in the 1990s. As you said, you had, of course, in the New York Times interview, Bennett being very clear, there's not going to be any peace process during the Bennett administration. Again, since Oslo, you have not had any Israeli prime minister say that, and then, of course, actually keep to that. So again, why members of the Israeli right would then want to switch from Bennett to Gantz, it's beyond me. Again, it just goes back to the egos that we were talking about beforehand and the personal relationships. And I think that a majority of Israelis care more about policy. And I'll tell you, I was talking with a lot of my friends, usually, and I'm sure you remember this also, when an Israeli prime minister goes to the Oval Office, members of the Israeli right, particularly the religious right, are a little bit scared. They're like, oh no, what's he going to give up now? What's he going to, and instead you had a situation where people were proud. And you're going ahead and you're watching him sit next to, President Biden and talking about Jerusalem, coming from Jerusalem, our undivided capital. And you're just hearing him say things where, again, with all the respect that I have for Netanyahu, and personally that I do have, he would never talk like that even in front of Obama when he was lecturing Obama. But the really the difference here, again, when you're looking at the Bennett approach, which is just, again, it's a different way of doing business, right? He is a businessman, after all, very successful one. He didn't make billions by being an unsuccessful businessman. You have to know, again, when you're trying to achieve an objective, that there could be different approaches, again, different strategies to get to that objective. So what I would love to see really coming from the opposition, and again, I'm speaking also as someone who spent, last year, a full year in the opposition and trying to do my part, when we were in that opposition, is to go ahead and speak to us about constructive issues. Instead, we have this, fake news about Biden falling asleep. We have, the fake news of all of this supposed, footage that was taken on Shabbat, when, of course, the Kabbalat Shabbat was an early meeting that was taken in before the candle lighting. I just don't understand. Is there really absolutely zero in terms of content that the opposition has, that they have to go ahead, they're grasping at straws, that they're going ahead and they're making things up? It's just very disappointing. Then again, instead of saying, oh, I don't like what Bennett's objective is, I don't like his policy, it's very difficult because, again, it's a very similar policy here. So what does he have left to do? To go ahead and criticize and say, oh, we shouldn't have daylight. We should surprise the Americans. We should just go ahead and do stuff and pretend that they don't exist, and everything will work out swell.
Well, listen, I hear what you're saying. I mean, personally, I deal with real issues. So, you know me. I mean, during Netanyahu years, I'm critical of Netanyahu while I'm yay for what I believe he's doing as best as possible, and I'm trying my best to do that with this government as well.
No,
and my issue, no. And my issues about the meeting were focused on what the critical concerns of mine that I'm raising with you, but I'm just going to play devil's advocate because, to me at least, the concern is not as much Bennett, the person, even as prime minister, but it's the package that comes along with him being prime minister with this government, because we have a prime minister who's supposed to take over to be prime minister in less than 2 years, who himself has said, yes, when he's prime minister in less than 2 years, he will push for the two-state solution.
He's actually said that he will not. And Ayelet Shaked said, and I'm happy to back her up also, if he decides to go back on the agreement, because again, the agreement that we had is very simple, right? We're not going to have the application of Israeli sovereignty, and we're not going to have a building freeze. We're not going to have a situation of a peace process towards a Palestinian state, but on the other side of it, we're not going to have a settlement boom of construction all over the place. We have understandings when it comes to all of these external issues, all these things that are outside the areas of agreement, what is a no-go and what cannot be moved upon. And I said flat out, and again, I'll back her up on this as I said that I would, if Lapid decides to go against the agreements and start a peace process against the position of Yamina and agreed upon, again, signed agreements that he has with our party, there will not be a coalition. We will crash it. If President Biden was able to respect that, I don't see any reason why Lapid would decide that he's going to be more left-wing than the Democrat president of the United States of America. And that's, by the way, why I think he has clarified his statements and said that he's not going to go ahead and do anything within that regard of taking us down, this peace process. It doesn't change his position. He believes in two-state solution. The majority of the MKs in this in this coalition do feel that way. And I understand that concern, but that's exactly why we changed. And we talked about this the last time that I was on your show, that the way that the weighting was done, excuse me, the New Hope and the Amina ministers have an equal weight to all of the other ministers. And then on the other side, you have people like Lieberman, who's also, pretty right wing, and a number of others as well, so that you're able to go ahead and make sure that you don't have an ability, right? We have that veto. They can't go ahead and take those positions and try to pull one over us. And in terms of the security cabinet, it's not a 50-50. There is a absolute majority in terms of the right-wing ministers within the security cabinet. Already there, it's Naftali, Ayelet, Matan Kahana. We threw in there Zev Elkin, Gidon Sarah. We threw in as many people as possible to be able to keep it as far to the right. Of course, the security cabinet deals with the most sensitive issues, as you are well aware. So I always hear from the opposition, and I understand this. They say, because they're in the Knesset, they say the majority of the coalition members are left and they're pulling you in a certain direction. And I hear that. What I'm saying is you have the government, right? You have the executive branch. There, Yamina and New Hope control 50% of the vote. And that is a very big thing. I wish that we had that in the Knesset. We don't. We don't have that in the coalition on the legislative branch. On the executive branch, we do. And on the most sensitive issues, there we have a absolute majority. We have over 50%. And we're able to make sure that on the executive level, that again, the policy is right wing.
So it's interesting because I've voiced my concerns differently. It's not about, I'm not looking at the numbers. Again, I'm not as knowledgeable on the inside as, but I'm pretty familiar with Israeli politics. The minister of a ministry has pretty much independence to run a ministry in terms of the internal decisions that have to be laws passed in the actual parliament in terms of budgetary decisions. And knowing coalition politics, and again, this doesn't have to do with legitimacy, but the fact that Nick is only the leader of a party of 6. So when you have your Lapid's party, which has 17, 18 seats, and he has however many ministers, ministers can get away with doing things that don't necessarily get the headlines that make an impact and make changes. So whether or not he would implement a state solution, but definitely with ministries under his ministers could do things, policies, whatever. It's not just that, because on the one hand here we're talking about no surprises with America. On the other hand, again, I'm going back to Lapid. I'm looking at the package. I'm not looking at Bennett being the problem. I'm looking at the package. Here, something that I imagine you agree with me, a huge strategic benefit that Netanyahu did for the state of Israel during his years was the development of an alliance with Eastern European countries in Europe, so that we had pro-Israel votes both at EU Parliament and at the United Nations. And in terms of no surprises, here we had a diplomatic incident with Poland, one of Israel's best strategic allies, because of how Yair Lapid dealt with a law that is not necessarily a good law, but the way he dealt with it was done in a horrific way. It was almost positive. Prime Minister Bennett even came out saying that he was in disagreement with how he handled it. And again, it's those type of issues where I'm concerned about, where even no matter, and again, the way I always phrase it to my audience is no matter how much Naftali Bennett as Prime Minister wants to do as best as possible, there are always going to be those undermining him of ministers of the left-wing parties in different ways. And that's my overall concern, and how much can you really stop it, even with the coalition agreements.
So I'm happy to speak to that.
Sure.
When we formed this government, I told you the thing that was most important for us was to keep as many of the most important portfolios within our power. Of course, being able to make sure that we had maintained the prime minister position within the right, at least for the first 2 years, was very important for us. But making sure the Justice Ministry would be with us the entire time, that the Interior Ministry would be with us the entire time, that the Religious Services Ministry would be with us and not with Lieberman or Lapid or someone else. And I can tell you, I've been working a lot with Matan Kahana, and there's a lot of good things to be able to talk about, in terms of that regard. Look, issues, right, we talk about justice with Gideon Sa'ar, education. We try to take as many of the most sensitive things and keep it by us. I can also tell you in terms of foreign affairs, Gideon Sa'ar is going to take over the foreign ministry when, assuming that we're going to have the rotation and Lapid ends up becoming prime minister. So you'll have this ability where Gideon Sa'ar will be able to have this check and balance on whatever it is that Lapid is trying to be able to do.
Bennett won't take over as foreign minister?
No, as part of the agreement, there's going to be a 4-way rotation. Lapid is going to move from foreign to prime minister. Bennett's going to move from prime minister to interior. Ayelet is going to move from interior to justice. And Gideon is going to move from justice to foreign. So you're going to have a 4-way rotation there between the really among, the most, if you
Senior.
take away defense and treasury, you're talking about the most senior of the portfolios within the government. But it's being done in a way where we're able to maintain, the same level of control there. It was very hard for Lapid to be able to give up the foreign ministry in the second half. He actually, as you mentioned, and it was originally agreed upon that Bennett would just take that position. Um, Bennett's interested in doing some other things instead. Gideon Sar, that's something that he really cares about a lot and wants to be able to go in and do. So you'll see a rotation, as I said, between those four ministers in that way. But Lapid will lose that, meaning he'll gain the premiership, but then he'll lose the influence that comes along with the foreign ministry.
Right.
And
No.
again,
I totally hear that. My whole concern is how much damage is Yair Lapid going to do to Israel's strategic interest as foreign minister in the 2 years that is foreign minister, which already he's proven to be doing damage.
No,
That's
so
my major.
I heard also what you said in terms of the Poland issue. We know this has been a consistent position that Lapid has. And when it comes to the foreign ministry, it's not about an executive order or legislation. You're able to do stuff just by opening your mouth. You can just ask Israel Katz, of course, who, and his first day on the job annoyed Poland to the point that he became persona non grata. So we've had a series of, whether it's on right or left, foreign ministers sort of unsettling the Polish-Israeli relationship. I know that's something that Netanyahu was very upset about, that Katz sort of spoiled that. He tried to repair it, but it was difficult. Ironically, Ashkenazi was better for that particular relationship with the Poles.
I totally accept that caveat, especially bringing up Katz, but still there's a major difference. On an ideological level, Lapid wants to align Israel with the progressive Western Europe and dump the Eastern European alliances, whereas Katz, even with his foolish stuff, he did not strategically realign Israel's relationships.
No. Again, Israel was just going ahead, and as someone who's very against the Holocaust, he was very upset in terms of the stuff that he saw coming out from Poland, and he went ahead and he made a knee-jerk reaction of actually saying what he thought.
Right.
Usually, foreign ministers ask their advisors if they can phrase things differently, if they could speak more diplomatically. I think you probably know Israel, maybe not as well as I do, but you know him well enough to know that he's perhaps one of the least diplomatic foreign ministers that Israel has had. And I'm putting that diplomatically. So, just in terms of that. But look, Bennett is the one that is prime minister. He's the one who's setting the stage. There is a lot of influence and power within the foreign ministry. I believe that. I know that there are people who don't believe that. They feel that it's just a place for cocktail parties and whistles and that it really doesn't do much. I think the Polish case study shows you that it does have influence, and whether you can say whether it can do anything good, it can definitely do damage. The good thing I would say to you is that, again, Gideon Sar can go in and repair whatever potential damage could be caused there. I would say, though, that I feel, looking at things just again, and look, we're only 10 weeks into this thing, right? We've only been in this government for a couple and a half of months, but so far, with that one, isolated incident aside, and I would say that there are people that support Lapid on that. It's, I'm not a descendant of Holocaust survivors, so I stay away from taking positions, when it comes to those issues. I don't think it's my place to be able to, decide, what was right or wrong there. But, we're talking about the debate around it and the controversy, and there definitely was. But with the exception of that one case, I haven't really seen anything in which there was a red flag that ruined a relationship or something that tried to take Israel and put it in a different direction. What I'm sure you've seen is tweet after tweet of leaders talking with Bennett. The Biden meeting was with Bennett, not Lapid. The Merkel meeting that was supposed to be on Sunday but didn't happen because of Afghanistan bombings was going to be with Bennett, not Lapid. The Sisi meeting, which I hope still happens, is going to be Bennett going down to Egypt again in terms of the suitcase. The suitcase is following Naftali Bennett, not Yair Lapid. He's the one calling the shots, and I think a majority of the leaders around the globe understand that. In terms of things happening again, we're talking just about the foreign ministry, about other ministries. Look, there are mechanisms in place here. And like I said, in terms of the more sensitive ministries, we own a majority of them. If we see that there are a bunch of ministers on the left that are choosing to sign executive orders on a bunch of issues that go beyond the agreements that we have, so we can do the same things in our ministries, meaning, there's this situation when you're sitting down where you understand that if you load your gun, the other side is also going to load their gun. It goes back to your first question in the beginning statements that I said at the top of the interview. A majority of the people are coming with the intention to work, and they're taking whatever disagreements they have and they're leaving it at the door in order to be able to make progress and move forward on the stuff that has to deal with their ministries.
Just to give everyone an example of the tit for tat you're referring to, and going back to Benny Gantz. And again, I'm not asking for your confirmation, but again, Benny Gantz is the defense minister. He's the one in charge of the Iran deal. And then he had this minister with Mahmoud Abbas. And the next thing we hear is that Minister Matana, who's the religious affairs ministry, is the one who is going to be talking to the parliament, to Israel's Senate, about the Iran issue, and Benny Gantz. So again, I'm not asking for confirmation because officially the Prime Minister's office said that they gave approval to his meeting with Mahmoud Abbas. But again, it seems like there was a little tit-tat there. You did something without our permission. Well, we're taking this away from you, and we're putting Saltan Khan to speak on this issue instead.
Look, I think, and I said this also before, Matan Kahana is a member of the Security Cabinet. He's also a member of the Prime Minister's, party, right? He's my good friend, in the Yamina party, currently in the number 3 slot, beneath Bennett and Shaked. It's the prime minister that sets the Iran policy, even if it's the defense minister that executes it. If the parliament wants to know, and they deserve to have an update, we're a democracy. The parliament wants to have an update in terms of what's happening with the Iran policy. I think it really makes the most sense for a member of the prime minister's party to be the one to go ahead and give that. One thing
you're saying it's a lichatchila situation. It's a lichatchila meaning.
I'm saying it makes sense. The person who's making the decisions, as opposed to the one who's carrying them out, should be the one to update the parliament. But I think that if I will say one thing about the meeting, since I saw various things that were published. The Security Cabinet convened earlier this evening, and they are the ones, of course, that are authorized by law to make the type of decisions that are in regard to a lot of things that I read, of course, based on media reports that were mentioned in the meeting between Abbas and Gantz. So again, it's the Security Cabinet, it's not Gantz alone that's able to determine a lot of those issues as well. So I think that's also an important caveat to put there, just again in terms of procedure of how things are actually done and accomplished.
So let me ask you one last issue regarding the Biden Naftali Bennett meeting. The Americans have voiced their desire to reopen the consulate in Jerusalem. Again, the U.S. Embassy now in Jerusalem. This consulate they want to open is not supposed to serve Israel. It's supposed to basically be an embassy for the Palestinian Authority in Jerusalem, which in a sense is a warning, that a sign of potentially dividing Jerusalem. The official statement that came out of the meeting was that they basically agreed to disagree. That Bennett basically said, we do not want you to open up the consulate in Jerusalem. That'll serve the Palestinian Authority. And Biden says, we want to. Is that a success? Basically saying we agreed to disagree. What are we supposed to think about that? Because again, this is a huge deal if America
Look,
succeeds in
you
opening up
know,
the consulate.
again, you're bringing up a micro thing, and we talked about the Palestinians in a macro context. But to me, and again, this goes back to what are your objectives? Is the objective to be able to give great speeches and look good and be able to get good brownie points? Our good friend Nir Barkat is doing an amazing campaign on this issue. Does that change anything? Possibly. I personally don't think there is a lot in terms of what that can do to influence. To me, what I care about is, again, what is the objective? Is the policy, is it something you want to see happen? Is it something you don't want to see happen? If you have a policy of you don't want to see something happening, even if you're not able to get a win within the specific wording or statement, one would, again, assuming that you care about the objective over the spectacle of a lot of fancy headlines and newspaper articles with your picture and publicity around you, that would be sufficient. Of course, to other people, they'll say, I want to hear a straight out, clear cut, 100% from the horse's mouth statement, from one side or to another side. I remember that I made a lot of fun out of Yvette Lieberman a number of times.
Yeah.
Right. I called him 48 Hours Lieberman. And when he took office, he said, okay, maybe not 48 hours, but judge me by the end of my term if Ismail Haniyeh is still alive or not. He finished his term as defense minister, and Ismail Haniyeh is, of course, not just alive then, like he's still kicking now. And of course, he's since been in the opposition. Now he's back in the coalition and back in the security cabinet and whatever it is. I think that, at least to me, right, the Israeli public will end up judging everybody based on their record. There'll be a lot of people that will be able to say that they had a lot of great press conferences, that they made a lot of great statements. But what it comes down to in the end is people want to look at the record. And Netanyahu did great things, but you cannot change the fact that his record includes the Y Plantation Agreement and the Hebron Agreement. You cannot change the fact that his record includes voting for the disengagement for the Girush in the Knesset. You cannot change the fact that it was under his watch that you had the first and only time that we had a settlement freeze in Judea and Samaria. And I can go on and on of things that are on his record. There are a lot of things that are being said about Bennett, about what he's going to do, what he's not going to do. There is a lot of, in my opinion, fear mongering. I think at the end of the term, we'll be able to go ahead and look at his record and see exactly what he did and what he did not do, and look at the full picture. And I think that will be a record that the great majority of our constituency will be happy with. Were they happy with the way? Are they happy with the way right now, in terms of the path and whatever? No, I would imagine that a lot of them do not like the strategy. I would imagine a lot of them don't like a lot of the tactics. I think in the end of the day, what they do care about is the policy and the overall, objective. And when it comes to policy objectives, as I said at the top of the show, we set out to be able to open the schools September 1st. We're doing that. We set out to be able to ride out this wave without closing businesses and not having a national lockdown. We were able to go ahead and deliver that. We went ahead and said that we want to be able to go ahead and pass a budget after years of not being able to do that. Again, we've been able to meet every challenge in terms of the budget, despite this very delicate 61-59 coalition. At every step of the way, we've been able to go ahead and deliver in every vote and pass it where we've needed to. And I believe that on Thursday, again, we're going to be able to pass it in the first reading the same way we were able to go ahead and pass it in the cabinet without an issue. And when it comes to a lot of these other issues that you're mentioning, we're going to be judged on what happens in the end of the day. And I think that just as we've been able to deliver on all the things I mentioned so far, there are many other things we're going to be able to deliver with. And I think that it takes time. Like I said, it's only been only 2.5 months since, this government has taken office. I think it's going to take time for people to fully understand the difference in the approach. And it takes time for people sort of settle and start, just like settle down and realize what it is that they're living through. Because I'm looking back 2 weeks ago when people are telling me we're going into a situation where we're not going to see our family for Rosh Hashanah or for the Chagim, for Sukkot. They're telling us we don't know what to do, about what happens with our kids if we're not able to send them to school on September 1st. Again, when we're talking about the real life issues of everyday Israelis, this is something the coalition has been able to go ahead and do a lot with. When it comes to the ideological issues that our constituency sent us to the Knesset, and to go ahead and really be a if you will, a wall to protect these issues, we're not going to be able to pursue a lot of them, but we are going to be able to prevent a lot of the left attempts to try to go ahead and hit at that wall and put us, in a worse situation. And I would even say that there have been accomplishments. Unfortunately, because of the coalition partners we have, we can't publicize and we can't take as much credit as I would like when it comes to a lot of the accomplishments that we have had. But we'll have to wait, I guess, till the end of the term, and then perhaps we'll have a few left-wing members in the coalition suddenly wake up and suddenly realize what it was that they sent, their fingers to agree to throughout this term.
Interesting. So I just want to ask you about this one last thing. I saw pleasantly surprising headline news, which actually makes no sense whatsoever, but that there is progress on the building of the E1 area between Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim, a strategic, hugely important strategic project that connects Jerusalem to Ma'ale Adumim, which is in Judea and Samaria, and in a sense puts a stop to a continuous potential Palestinian state surrounding Jerusalem from the west, from Judea and Samaria. Is that a true headline? Because again, it sounds like it doesn't make sense that this government would be allowed to do that with the left in power in this government.
Like I told you, unfortunately, we can't take credit for a lot of the stuff that we're doing because it could upset members of the coalition. Go to the Peace Now website. Peace Now is the one that is allegedly accusing the government of 2 days after the Biden-Bennett visit of advancing E1. This is not, something coming from us. This is something coming from Peace Now. They're not exactly our best friends. I'm just not going to comment on that. But again, as within the context of what I said before, there are a lot of very, very good things that we've done for the Jewish people. Unfortunately, we cannot take credit for that. And that's just the reality of this coalition. I would say again, here again on an ending note, I said before, it comes down to, politics. It's about people. It's about relationships. It's about trust and credibility. Everything that the opposition is trying to do, whether it's Netanyahu or Smotrich or the Haredim, is to try to go ahead and say, you can't trust Bennett and his people. There's no credibility left. There's no right-wing, fiber left in any ounce of any bone of any Yamina list member, right? We have Gafni saying not to allow us or count us within a minyan, and Matan Kahana, my friend, is Antiochus, and so on and so forth in terms of these, really horrendous, attempts to delegitimize everybody here. But what I can tell you, and this as a person who, you go into Knesset and you go by the faction meetings every week, and you see me there sitting there at the faction meeting table of Yamina every week with the prime minister, the ministers, and the other MKs. And it's a very, it's a tight circle. We're not a big faction. We didn't get a lot of MKs into Knesset, right? We're a small knit group, but I can tell you this, that what you have there in that room is people who are working very hard day and night. And they're doing that for, of course, all Israeli citizens, but they have not at all forgot who sent them there and who they're representing. And none of them have changed their values. I can't think of one of them that I can tell you is a different person, compared to who they were during the campaign. As you know, some of these people, I know them for many years. I'm the only person besides Ayelet Shaked to sign a candidacy form on each one of the Knesset elections of 2013, 2015, plus the last four that we've had in terms of, being on, having the honor of being on that Knesset list, and the opportunity of many times being the least important person within the meeting of the most important people. So please know, again, and this is the message I want people to take away with them tonight. The prime minister cares about you, the ministers, the MKs. We're with you, and again, people send us messages and we take them. Sometimes we respond. Sometimes, let's say the style is not in which one that dignifies a response, but we read everything that's being sent to us, and feel free to, again, continue to keep us within the loop in terms of where your feelings are, and understand that the difference here is not one in terms of policy objectives. It's a difference here in terms of approach. And whether you agree with us or not, you should, pray that we are, we've chosen the right approach, because again, what is at stake here is the future of our state and the success of our nation.
Jeremy, it is always a pleasure to talk to you, and I do appreciate being able to have this conversation with you, putting all the cards on the table. Again, I'm a big supporter of having whatever representatives we have in our government to do as best as possible, obviously with my concerns about this particular government. And I'm happy to have a frank, full conversation and be able to voice concerns and the questions and hear your feedback and answers. So thank you very, very much. And I am sure everyone listening is going to take a lot away from it. So thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Avi. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and I look forward to many other opportunities to be able to alleviate a lot of the concerns that you have.
It will be a pleasure. I'm sure there will be a lot of times. In the meantime, it should be a healthy and happy and healthy and sane as possible new year, considering the next time we probably meet up is going to be after the Jewish year, which is next week. So wishing you all the best. Shana Tova, Jeremy, and thanks again. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed and really internalized a lot of information that you were able to hear directly from someone very close to the Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, and to the workings of this government with all of its complexities and concerns. So I very much hope you enjoyed everything you heard. I definitely did myself. So signing off from the eternal ancestral homeland of the Jewish people, this is Avi Abelo for the Pulse of Israel. Thanks, everyone, for watching.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.